Welcome back to Terran Tales HFY. Previously, our characters faced danger and discovered new alliances, but there's much more ahead. In Part 2, expect more twists, revelations, and heart-pounding moments as the story continues. If you're new here, be sure to check out Part 1 first. Ready to dive back into the action? Let's continue the adventure with Part 2.
Power was shattered. Old alliances in the council floundered, unsure who or what would fill the void. My staff asked, should we demand terms? Should we force a new order? Instead, I insisted on something older, something more dangerous. Example. In my transmission to the remaining Drask, I was neither boastful nor punitive, simply clear. The war was never about which species could destroy the other fastest. Anyone can destroy. We seek now a future where the cost of conquest is so high, no one forgets it once the guns fall silent. I laced my words with warning and hope, offering Drask survivors the choice of surrender, of collaboration, of building a different path. I did not expect many would understand, certainly not right away, but I needed the message to be clear to the galaxy at large. Humanity would not become the monster it defeated.
My moment of surrender did not come at gunpoint, but in the deep solitude after the throne room fell silent. I walked the halls, listening to the sounds of distant fighting, now mostly citizens in panic, not soldiers defending anything of value. Tradition dictated I fight to the end, but tradition had no guidance for a war lost to wit, not weapon. When the call for unconditional surrender arrived, I paced my cell of command, claws scraping across the worn metal. My first urge was defiance. An empty gesture, but at least familiar. But I was tired. More than that, I was filled with the dreadful awareness that if I led my people onward, I would not be remembered as a hero, but as the architect of their extinction. So, with each breath heavy with regret, I accepted the terms. I told my surviving captains to lay down arms, to save those who remained, for now and for the uncertain tomorrow. It was not dignity, this surrender, but it was the closest thing to wisdom I had left.
In the cooling war rooms beneath London, the light had shifted. No alarms, no urgent comms, just the blue-white glow of status boards, comforting in their silence. My subordinates pressed for celebration. "We've done the impossible," they said. But I felt only the weight of aftermath. It pressed down, more implacable than the enemy ever had. I composed my reports for the council, cautious, a careful accounting, neither triumphalist nor apologetic. Earth's diplomacy would shape the next centuries, and I was determined not to repeat the hubris of those we had just unseated. Reconstruction began at once. Wherever Drask captives awaited processing, I insisted they be given medical care and access to their embassy liaisons, not just as a gesture of principle, but as a hedge against future resentment. The hardest lesson of all: victory is never final. The world after must be even more carefully constructed than the world before.
Our cities were not leveled, but our order was. In the days that followed, I toured what little remained of once proud districts.
Empty marketplaces, walls tagged with accusations and desperate prayers. News kiosks still flickering with the last propaganda from a vanished regime. I watched my people stagger through ruined hierarchy, unable to decide whether to weep at their loss or grasp the opportunity for new beginnings. I had never been a philosopher. My loyalty was always to unity, not to liberty, but even I found myself wondering if we'd mistaken obedience for strength all these centuries. The old emperor, his final speech drowned out by static, had vanished. Rumors said suicide. Others said exile. I did not mourn. My sorrow was reserved for a different loss. The certainty that had once girded our civilization, now irretrievably shattered.
Reintegration was a process as political as the war had been military. When the Galactic Council met, the Drask delegation, new, modest, silent, took their seat, heads bowed. I spoke for humanity not as a victor, but as a fellow survivor among many. I warned of the dangers of pride, the cost of assuming invulnerability. Let this war be the last waged in ignorance, I said. Let us all become harder to surprise and slower to judge. Those who expected grand demands were disappointed. We asked only for new truth, transparency, mutuality, a willingness to police ambition before it fueled disaster again. Some called us naive, but I saw for the first time other worlds watching us not in fear, but in a wary respect.
In the new council chambers, I did not recognize many faces. Our old credentialed functionaries, all replaced. I sat quietly beside our new delegates, feeling the old itch to command, yet lacking leverage or desire to do so. Watching the humans, I recognized a strange kinship. Their victory wore heavily on them. They had not become our replacements. They were, if anything, as reluctant to rule as we were to be ruled. Within my own sphere, I supported petitions for a constitutional assembly, a new experiment, a taste of the democracy we'd long scorned. Perhaps I would have seen the appeal sooner. For now, it was enough to be a witness to history and to the humility shared by those who had seen their worlds upended and lived to tell of their survival.
In victory I found no joy, only necessity and the hope for vigilance. Each night, as I walked the quiet corridors of Sol Command, I reminded myself, our legacy will not be the war, but in what follows. Old friends and new allies both look to us for guidance, for assurance that power would be held in check, not abused. It is the burden of the survivor to remember every victory plants the seed for future misunderstanding, if not tended with care. Diplomacy means accepting enemies into your councils, forging contracts on top of old scars. It isn't clean, this peace, but it is alive, contested, argued, ever at risk of unraveling. And there's no greater work.
I was once Vizar the Fleetmaster, terror of the lesser stars. Now, I lead only in words, my leadership measured by patience, not by conquest. In the evenings, I walk the perimeter of our reconstructed council, watching delegates from worlds once shuddered at the mention of our name. No one bows anymore. Perhaps this is grace in disguise. We Drask must learn humility, that most bitter of all victories. We must abandon the dream of endless empire for the pragmatic reality of collective survival. If this is my last lesson, let it be that obedience is nothing without understanding, and that even pride can be a bridge, not just a barrier.
Time softens many wounds, but not all. In the years after, I served on countless panels, wrote account after account for history's scrutiny, and debated the meaning of what we'd accomplished with admirals, historians, and rivals alike. Whenever questioned, how did you outwit a force so vast? I always answered with the same core lesson. We listened, we learned, and when the moment came, we disrupted, not their fleets, but their certainty. The war's memory reached everywhere. Cadets studied Drask tactics, the way surgeons study the failures of ancient medicine. Our children grew up in a solar system wary, but no longer terrified of outsiders. My personal legacy was never in medals, but in paving a difficult, winding road toward peace, one fraught with error, humility, and hard-won trust. Each year, at the Memorial for the Lost, I read the names of both our fallen and theirs. Not every mourner understood, but it mattered that the list was read aloud, that no one rewrote the story to suit their pride.
I had to find a place in the new order, far, far from the flashing banners of conquest and the crisp step of drilled soldiers. For a time I considered exile, obscurity. But the young voices that emerged from my own kin, from the newly seated Drask Assembly, asked me to teach instead. I became the first former warlord to preside quietly over debates instead of barrages. I spoke little of my failures as a commander, but much of what defeat had taught me. That cleverness can be as devastating as brute force, that worldviews can change, that survival sometimes means becoming what once seemed unthinkable. We reformed our schools, weaving caution where once there had only been obedience. Human literature was translated, discussed, even embraced, not as a threat but as a necessary mirror. Some Drask still curse my name for not burning hotter, not resisting longer. But those who matter, I hope, sense that our continued presence at the council, still proud, still changed, is a better memorial than any monument we might have raised over the bones of old glory.
There are moments, even now, when the balance feels precarious. Rumors of new weapons, secret treaties, shadowy threats. These did not vanish with the sound of our last cannon. But I take solace in the daily work, chasing disputes, brokering fragile alliances, silencing would-be agitators, not with threats, but with the demand for honest dialogue. I sometimes think of Vizar, his stern, battered face as dignified in surrender as it was in challenge. He is not a friend, not as humans mean the word, but he is a peer, a necessary adversary turned collaborator in the strange symphony of peace. Our communications remain formal, rarely sentimental, but the occasions when he speaks in careful respect are victories too, no less real for being quiet. Every council session is a wager against history's urge to repeat itself. We can't undo the scars, but I watch the new delegates, Drask and human alike, debate fiercely, sometimes even laugh, and I hope.
We are not what we once were, nor will we ever be so again. But I have come to accept that change is not the same as loss. In my old age, I have become something I never would have tolerated before. A mediator, an elder, a keeper of difficult memories. Some days
I serve as a living warning. This is what hubris buys. Other days, I am asked, "How did you survive?" And I answer, "We lost many things, but we discovered truths too great for conquest to carry." I keep Amelia's message, recorded after the last day of battle, inside a private datapad. Never by chance, never by might alone. If ever the Drask stumble toward old ambitions, I make them listen, word for word. Peace is not a finish line, but a discipline. I tell myself and my people that to seek control is easy. To earn respect is much harder and far more lasting.
As years turned to decades, the story spread. Humanity, once the upstart, had remade its image, not by erasing threats, but by proving that resilience could be as formidable as aggression. We still face crises. The galaxy is too large, its ambitions too varied for any victory to be total. But younger generations learned from our struggle with the Drask. They innovate, dissent, collaborate, as if it were a second nature. And when new dangers appear, it is not just Earth that prepares to meet them. The Drask, too, are at the ready, sometimes still prideful, sometimes inflexible, but never again blinded by certainty. In private, I do not romanticize the ordeal. It was a scarring, costly business. But I am grateful that, of all the things we might have left behind, we cultivated a discipline of self-awareness, a wariness of easy answers, and a trust that even the hardest enemies can one day become partners in purpose.
It is strange to remember how natural conquest once felt. Now, I know it was little more than habit, a rhythm learned too young, unthinking and brittle. We live at a slower pace now, more questioning, more circumspect. What power I wield is quiet, offered in counsel rather than command. I have become, perhaps, a better guardian in defeat than I ever was in triumph. As I watch this new galaxy, young, sometimes foolish, sometimes wise, I hope that those who remember the taste of defeat are far less likely to cause it in others. If what I have learned endures, then peace is not a truce, but a continual rebirth, a challenge as fierce and worthy as any war under any star.
Like what you heard? Smash that like button, drop your boldest HFY moment in the comments, and subscribe for weekly tales of survival, sabotage, and spacefaring glory. This is Terran Tales HFY, where humanity always finds a way.